basis behind Hajj. God wants to remind us where you really come from, who you truly are, that we all come from the same source. In fact, Imam Ali has a hadith in which he says, "Kullukum bin Adam." There was, during the time of the leadership of Imam Ali of the Muslim nation, the Muslim treasury, every week, they would collect the alms taxes and they would distribute it among the inhabitants of the Arabian Peninsula. And this was done every single week. It was distributed equally among those that were in need. And history tells us there was an incident where one day, this would happen on every Thursday. Every Thursday this would happen. One day, as the Imam was walking through the streets, he noticed that there was an old man who was begging from the people. And this was right after the distribution of the wealth. I mean, people shouldn't be begging. They should have just received their share of income. So he went and he asked him, he told him, "Why are you begging in the streets?" He said, "Because I have no money, I have no food." He asked him, "Did you not receive your share of the wealth, the distribution?" He said, no one gave me anything today. So the Imam went back to the custodian, to the person who was in charge of distribution, and he told him. He said, "I just saw an old man walking in the streets, begging, asking people for money. What's going on?" So the man told him, he said, "This person, he's a non-Muslim. He's not part of the Muslims. So I figured, this money should be just given to the Muslims." The Imam told him, he said, "Listen, there's no difference whether he's a Muslim or he's not a Muslim, or whether he's Arab or he's not Arab, or whether he's from the area or outside the area. Kullukum min Adam. You are all from Adam. All of you have the same source. You're all the children of Adam. Kullukum min Adam. Wa Adamu min turab." And Adam was created from clay, from dust. Reminding us of our true essence, who we really are. In the end, we're all from the same source. And that source is the dust. There's no reason for me as a Muslim or a non-Muslim, as a male or a female, as depending on my social status or my financial status or what have you, there's no reason for me to show pride or arrogance when the source is the same. When my essence is the same as that person who I'm showing arrogance over. So when it comes to our interactions with one another, this is very important. Islam emphasizes that we interact with one another based on justice, based on equality. Imam Ali says, فَجَعَلَ حُقُوقَ عِبَادِهِ مُقَدَّمَةً عَلَى حُقُوقِهِ. That the rights of mankind have a priority. God has made the rights of mankind with one another as a priority before His own rights as the Lord. And that He holds us accountable for our dealings with others before He even holds us accountable of our relationship with God Himself. And we notice that a lot of people, they pay attention to many of the obligations and praying and perhaps fasting, but when it comes to our interactions with others, we really pay no attention in many cases. And this is not what is required of us. This is not what we are encouraged to do. This is not the lifestyle that we are encouraged to live as Muslims. When it comes to others, we have to live with them based on decency, based on respect, based on morality. This is what is expected of us as Muslims. It's not up to me to decide whether this person, just because of their faith, just because they have a different faith, just because they believe in something else, whether I'm better or that person is better than me. This is not up to us to decide. In fact, the Quran tells us very frankly that it is God's decision. God is the ultimate judge. It's not me or anyone else's decision whether a person is good or bad, whether a person deserves reward or punishment. Not even the Prophet, peace be upon him, who we consider as the greatest creation of God, not even he had the ability or that authority to decide whether a person was punished or rewarded, whether a person was good or bad. God tells us in the Quran that it's up to him to decide in the end who's rewarded, who's suitable for reward, who should be rewarded, and God forbid, who should be punished. It's up to God. He's the creator, he's the master. He is the one who has designed this universe and everything within this universe, and it's up to him to decide how he deals with his servants. In fact, the Quran tells us that in verse 62 of chapter 2 is known as Surah Al-Baqarah. It's called the cow. There's an incident, in which a story of the cow and the people of Israel with Moses is mentioned, and this is the longest chapter in the Quran, chapter number 2. This story is mentioned, the calf, it's mentioned, and thus the chapter has been named the cow or the calf. In verse 62, God says, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَالَّذِينَ هَادُوا وَالنَّصَارَى وَالصَّابِئِينَ مَنْ آمَنَ بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ وعمل صالحا فلهم أجرهم عند ربهم ولا خوف عليهم ولا هم يحزنون. The translation of this verse, God says, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, verily, indeed, those who have faith. Here, those who have faith is a reference to the Muslims, those who have faith in Islam. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَالَّذِينَ هَادُوا, and the Jews, وَالنَّصَارَى, and the Christians, وَالصَّابِئِينَ, the Sabians, مَنْ آمَنَ بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ. These groups, as long as they do three things, as long as they do three things, there is absolutely no need for them to worry or anyone else to worry about them. That they will be rewarded by God as long as they do three things. And all of them are equal in these three things. Man amana billah, number one, who has faith in God. Regardless whether you're a Muslim, you're a Christian, you're a Sabian, you're a Jew, whatever it may be. If you have faith in God, man amana billah, you recognize God and have faith in Him. Wal yawm al-akhir, and you believe in the hereafter. You believe in a life after death. You believe in accountability, that you're held accountable, you're held responsible for your actions in this life. That no matter how long you live in this life, you will be held accountable for every detail, every single action, every moment that you spend in this life by God. وَعَمِلَ صَالِحًا, and does good, is a righteous person, does good deeds. As long as you do these three things, فَلَهُمْ أَجْرُهُمْ عِنْدَ رَبِّهِمْ, their reward is with whom? With their Lord. فَلَهُمْ أَجْرُهُمْ عِنْدَ رَبِّهِمْ وَلَا خَوْفٌ عَلَيْهِمْ, and there is no fear for them. وَلَا هُمْ يَحْزَنُونَ, there is no need for them to be sorrowful or fearful. And this is a very clear verse in the Quran. There's a few different translations, English translations of the Quran. If you take any one of them and you read this verse in that translation, it's going to give you the same exact idea, because this verse is so clear. There's no ambiguity to this verse. And this is God speaking. God who has created all of mankind, God who has sent the different prophets along with their divine revelations and the messages. It's not up to me to decide as a human being whether my neighbor or my coworker or this person or that person is fit to be rewarded or punished. Each and every person is held accountable for their deeds based on their relationship with their Lord and based on their relationship with others. And thus, it becomes very important that we understand how we interact with others around us, that we're held accountable for the way we deal with those around us. In another verse, God says, Ya ayyuhan nas. In many of the verses, if you go through the Quran, you'll notice that certain verses are directed for the Muslims only. There's a specific injunction in which the Muslims are considered to do. And thus, you'll notice God says, Ya ayyuhal ladhina amanu. O you who believe. When you see the verse, O you who believe in the Quran, this is a reference to the Muslims. In other verses, God says, Ya ayyuhan nas, O mankind. So, regardless of whether you're Muslim or not, O mankind, O human beings, all of humanity. Ya ayyuhan nas, inna khalaqnakum min dhakarin wa untha. Verily, it is God, who has created you. Creation comes from God. This is what we believe in. Inna khalaqnakum min dhakarin wa untha. We have created you from a pair, a male and a female. And this is a reference to Adam and Eve. Inna khalaqnakum min dhakarin wa untha. وَجَعَلْنَاكُمْ شُعُوبًا وَقَبَائِلًا. And we have created you into different nations and tribes and backgrounds and races and ethnicities. This is the work of God. God has created all of these different backgrounds, these different colors, shapes, and sizes that we see. It's all God's creation. And then he says, لِتَعَارَفُوا. Why did we do this? Was God bored? No, God was not bored. لِتَعَارَفُوا. So that you may know one another. This is the meaning of the word لِتَعَارَفُوا. So that you may know one another. So that you may get to know those of different faiths. Those who do not share your ideology or your faith. Those who do not share your skin color. Those who do not share your place of worship or where you live or whatever it may be. لِتَعَارَفُوا. So you get to know one another. And then God, in the end of this verse, he says, إِنَّ أَكْرَمَكُمْ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ أَتْقَاكُمْ. And the best of all of you, the best of all of creation, إِنَّ أَكْرَمَكُمْ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ, the best of you in the eyes of God, not in the eyes of human beings, because we have many different levels of basing who the best is. إِنَّ أَكْرَمَكُمْ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ, in the eyes of God, the best of you, أَتْقَاكُمْ. He or she who's more God conscious, who's more aware of God, more aware of their duty to God. And part of our duty to God is the way we interact with one another. And this is very important. This is the way that Islam asks us to deal with others is based on understanding one another. In fact, in another verse in chapter 16, this verse that I just read was chapter 49, verse 13. In another verse from chapter 16, verse 125, God tells us how, as Muslims, we should call people to God. So one of the obligations of Muslims is not only for them to live their life as good Muslims, but also to teach others about Islam. Not in the same way as perhaps we don't have like missionaries to go out, and this is not the way that Muslims usually spread their religion or propagate the religion. But in calling people, in teaching people about your faith and about God, he says, "Ud'u ila sabili rabbik." Call people to the way of your Lord, bil hikmati wal maw'izati al hasana, through two means. Use two tools, and this is God telling us, in order to call people to your Lord. Bil hikmah, number one, wisdom. Call people to your Lord through wisdom. Wal maw'izati al hasana. Number two, a beautiful piece of admonishment, kind admonishment. وَجَادِلْهُمْ بِالَّتِي هِيَ أَحْسَنُ. And if you get into an argument, you get into a debate with someone, there's differences, there's going to be differences, and obviously, naturally, you're going to get into some form of debate